Hello and welcome to another episode of PG's Minecraft command tutorial. Uh, by this point we've talked a lot about what a command in Minecraft means, how you use that to interact with the Minecraft world on a higher level. So now it's time for us to start talking about a lot of these commands specifically. And we're going to start off with the teleportation command. So what is the teleportation command? Well, the teleportation command is how you modify an entity's position in the Minecraft world. So for us to use this command efficiently, we need to understand what does position in a Minecraft world mean, and then we need to understand a lot of the arguments that go behind this teleportation command. So with that, let's get started. Before we talk about command and position in the world, I want to talk about a quick computer science topic. So the idea behind what is an integer and what is a floating point number. So if you take in any math class, you probably know what an integer is. You know, it's any number 0, 1, 2, 3, any whole number. They can be negative, so -1, -3. It's the whole numbers on the number line, with negatives and zeros thrown in. So then in computer science, there's a term called a floating point number. And what is a floating point number? Well, a floating point number is any number with the decimals behind it. So normally, you might call them rational numbers or something like that in math class. Well, in computer science, it's called a floating point number. So you have like 1.3, you have 698.490, and just to bring it up, a floating point number can be, its precision is determined by how many decimal points you go after it. So 4.4 has 1 point of precision versus that has 4 points of precision. 4.8723 has 4 points of precision. We're going to be I'll be using the terms integers and floating point numbers to describe a few of these things, so I think it's important that you have an understanding of what I'm saying when I use those terms. So before we can start talking about the command, the teleportation command, it's important that you understand how position in the Minecraft world works. So basically, Minecraft is built on a grid, a Cartesian coordinate system, just like you might see in math class, except for instead of just x and y, there's also an extra z-axis, because this is a 3D world, so you need 3 dimensions to work with. So you have, as you can see right up in here, you have your x, y, z. And also up here, you can see that the coordinates are not in integers, they are in floating point numbers. That means that it saves your position to the decimal, to a degree of precision higher than just an integer. If it was just an integer, then you would only be like, if I moved to the right at all, I wouldn't be like I wouldn't move from this block, I would move directly to that block. So it'd be kind of jumping, kind of like maybe imagine one of those old games where you're on a grid, and so you move like from space to space. Movement would work a lot more like that instead of being able to move like in between blocks, if that makes sense. So like I'm over here in this block versus just being like in the center and then moving immediately to the center on this block. However, even though we do save these up here, your actual coordinates, as floating point numbers, there is this coordinate system, the block coordinate system. And the block coordinate system is saved as integers. So essentially, if you can kind of think about it like those old grid games in the same way. So like if I'm over here, let's keep an eye on my coordinates. I'm at -1, 56, -4. I move to the right, I'm now at -1, 56, -5, because I'm now on this block as opposed to this block. So these are integers, and that's how it saves this block grid. So there's actually like sort of 2 grids going on here. They are closely related, as you can see. Like I'm at 0 here, and I'm at 0 on the block grid, but this saves to a higher degree of precision because it also keeps track of where I am in the block, whereas this just keeps track of what block I'm in. And you'll see similarly, if you look here, there's actually a third grid being kept track of as well. There's the chunk grid. Well, you'll see this first part is where I am in the chunk. So if I come back here, I'm at 0, 0 in the chunk. If I come over to a new chunk, let's go the other way. So like, you see I'm at 15, 15 in the chunk. That means I'm almost on the outskirts of it. So like, if I go here, I'll be at 0 again. If I go down here, I'll be at 0. So I'm at 15, 15 of the chunk. Because chunks are 16 by 16 by 16 areas, so you can be within like the 0 to 16 of the chunk, or 0 to 15, excuse me, because it's 0 to 15, which would be 16 numbers. And then also which chunk you're in. So there's a chunk grid going on as well. So this is the 0, 0 chunk. If I move to this chunk, I'm at the -1 chunk here, and it keeps track of where I am within that -1 chunk. And then like this is the -1 in the Z direction chunk. So then this way is the 0, 0 chunk, the entire 0, 0 chunk. And then also this also works in the Y direction. So like if I go up to here, I'm at 0, 0, 0 in the 0, 4, 0 chunk, which means that like if you imagine a 16 by 16 by 16 block, I'm at the very corner of it, very right here at the bottom right, depending on where you're actually looking, because again, a lot of these coordinates can be sort of relative based on what chunk you're in. So yeah, and it's important to keep in mind that, you know, these are the coordinates that everything is relative to. This is the this is the standard that all the Minecraft world is based off of, is these coordinates, which makes it a lot easier for determining position and then deciding where you want to go based on that. So you don't have like multiple different ideas of like, well, I'm using like this coordinate system, and then well, I'm using this one. We're all using this one. So like if we were in the same world, we all have this as a standard to keep in mind, which if you've ever played and have tried to meet up with your friends on a server because you've been separated, you may have found this useful in the past. Well, it's just as useful for commands as well. So now let's talk a little bit, we've talked a little bit about the grids that we're on. Let's talk a little bit about the axes we're on. So we talked a little bit about it in the last video, but I want you to look at, see, this is probably the best way, these two numbers right here. This one being your Y rotation, and this one being your X rotation. So, if you remember, I said in the last video, there's the Y rotation, because if you look at, like, my cursor here, the green bar is the Y axis. If you can imagine, like, my body as the Y axis, and then we spin around my body, that's why it's called the Y rotation, because you're rotating around the Y axis. Similarly, if you imagine, let's see, this is, the red bar is the X axis, so if you look at this X axis, and you can imagine rotating around that, that's why it's called the X rotation. Because if you look there, that's what you're rotating around. When you look up, you're rotating around the X axis, up and down. So keep in mind the Y rotation goes from -180 to positive 179.9, and then it wraps around. So 180 is actually the same thing as -180. 270 is the same thing as -90. 360 is the same thing as 0. And you can keep going like that. So like if I did 540, I would end up at, I think it's 180. I think I did that right. Yeah. So if I did like 540, I would also end up here. So if you, yeah, it's good to remember that essentially, like, you're looking around a circle in terms of degrees that way. And so when it wraps around, you can also say that negative 180 is also 180, is also 540, is also add 360 to 540. So that would be 600 plus, it'd be like 900. That would also be this value. The X rotation, on the other hand, does not wrap around. It goes from negative 90 to 90. If you go less than negative 90, you will stay at negative 90. If you look at 90, if you go bigger than 90, you will just be put at 90, which is looking straight down. So 90 is straight down, negative 90 straight up, and there's nothing except for values between negative 90 and 90. So let's talk a little bit about the directions we're facing here. So we have our north, west, south, and east. North is the negative z on the actual and block grid and chunk grid. So on all the grids, it's towards the negative z. It's also negative 180 or 180 if you choose to think about things in terms of positive numbers. That's the north direction. West is going to be towards the negative x, as you can see here. It's the 90 degrees. It is towards the negative x in all your grids here. West south. South is towards the positive because this was negative, so this obviously is going to be positive. This is at 0, 360 if you want to think about it that way. Positive z in all these in all these grids, and then finally east is going to be positive x, and it's going to be the minus 90, or if you want to think about things in terms of positive numbers, then it's 270 degrees on the y rotation axis. Now that we've talked about position in the world, we can start talking about the teleport command itself. So the teleport command can be written in two ways, either /tp or /teleport. If you want to write it out, both ways work. Both ways work the same. I'll probably just do TP because it's faster to type. I might type in teleport at some point just because, yeah. So the teleport command takes 3 arguments. The first argument is going to be who you want to teleport. So we talked about target selectors in the last video. You can tell the first argument is going to targets. So you're going to want to use a target selector based on who you want to teleport. We'll do at E for now, and 560. And you see, I'm the only entity here, so it teleports me there. And just to spawn a few pigs as well, just to see that it's teleporting every single entity. And I'll put myself off of 0, 0. There we go. So teleports all 4 of us, 4 current entities, right here to 0, 0. You may have seen that when I typed it in, it was also trying to suggest coordinates. It suggested my actual coordinates last time. Now it's suggesting relative coordinates using the tilde notation. Basically, you can sort of skip the first target selector if you want to, and we talked about this a little bit. It's the understood target selector if you skip it, and you can just move on to the second target selector. The second argument, rather than typing in a target selector, and it will assume that you're using at S as your target selector. So the second argument is going to be where you are teleporting these entities that you've just selected to. So if you do TP, let's say I want to teleport every single entity, well, it's going to bring up all your target selectors again, or your coordinates, because that's the second argument can be either a location or destination, essentially. So if you want the destination to be an entity, then it has target selectors to teleport all these entities to one person, or you can just do it to a specific location. So you see it brings up at A here, but when I click on it, this is red, which means that it's not an accepted argument. Now, why is that? Well, this second argument has to be a singular destination or location. So it can't be multiple things. Well, at A has the possibility of being multiple different places if you have multiple different players, or at E, again, well, there could be multiple different entities in the world, right? It's like I have this pig, and I teleport slash TPPG805 at E. What entity would it teleport me to? There's no specification here. Well, it's very important that you only have one. So if you do want to teleport to a specific entity, you're going to want to use one of the selector sets to limit it down. And now this part is actually very important. You have to type in limit equals 1, because even if you do type in, let's say I got out a sword, killed this pig, and now there's only one pig in the world. Even if I type in slash TPPG5 at E, type equals pig, well, there's only one pig in the world. That's still only one destination, but there could be multiple different types of. There could be multiple pigs in the world. This doesn't technically narrow it down enough. You still have to have the limit equals 1 so that it knows that there is only one destination, which will, in this case, be the nearest pig, which is right here. So whenever you're using target selectors as your destination, you have to remember to limit it to be exactly one entity. So any of the at P's, at R's, or at S's would work, but if you do at A, then you have to limit it to 1 somehow, or using the limit selector set. And similarly with at E, you also have to do the limit equals 1, so that you are only targeting one of the entities that you are trying to teleport to. Now, let's say there isn't an entity where you're trying to teleport. The other way that you can teleport is using coordinates, right? So I often do 0, 56, 0, because that's where my ground is, and it teleports me right here. So you'll notice I actually typed in 0, 56, 0, but it put me to 0 0.5, 56.0, and 0 0.5. I put in integers, and it teleported me to a float, technically, in terms of actual coordinates. Now, why is that? Well, when using the teleport command, if you put in integers, then it's going to assume you're using the block grid. So, for example, if I do slash TPPG805 10 56 10, teleports me to the block 10 10. But it tries to put me in the center of the block, so it does 10.5 and 10.5 here. That's why at 0 0 it put me at 0.5, because it's trying to put me in the center of whatever block I'm doing. So if I go negative 10, see, it puts me at negative 9.5, negative 9.5, because similarly it just adds 0.5 to put you in the exact center of the block that you're trying to teleport to. So if you use integers, then it's going to teleport you using the block grid rather than the actual grid. Now you can put in floating point numbers. So let's say I want to make this exact. I want to teleport to 0 0 exactly. Well, it doesn't teleport me to the 0 0 block. Now it teleports me to the actual coordinates 0 0, which you'll see 0 0 is right here in between these 4 blocks, because I'm at the 0 position of many of these blocks. Yeah, so all of the integers in the actual grid are actually in between blocks. So like, if I teleport to 0, this is essentially 0 in the X, then it's actually between these 2 rows of blocks. If you 0 in the Z, then it's actually in between this block and this block, in between these 2 rows of blocks. It's like right along this line is where the 0 is. So integers are actually in between the blocks on the actual grid. Floating point numbers, however, determine where you are in the block. So that's why you get 0.5 is right here in the middle, because it goes from 0 all the way up to like 0.999 repeating all the way up to where you're like right here towards the very edge, like right there. See, I'm at like 0.962. I'm very close to being at 1 because the integer 1 is going to be right in between these two blocks on the grid here. So you can teleport using floating point numbers to a degree of precision, which, you know, if I wanted to do like 0.799, teleport me to exactly 0.799, which is like right here. So however precise you want to be, you can be precise with the teleport command if you want to. A lot of times you won't need to. You'll just need to know the block, so then you just do like 0.560, and teleport it right to the center of the block. So very useful. If you need to teleport to somewhere with more precision, you can, but oftentimes you don't need to, so you can just stick with using the block grid, and it will make things a lot simpler. So you may have noticed that when using these commands, especially with actual coordinates, if I do 0.560 again, I don't get teleported in the Y to 0.5. It doesn't add 0.5 to this number. It just teleports me to 0. Well, Minecraft is actually like pretty smart about this. It knows that you want to just get put onto the block. So we talked about integers being in between the blocks. Well, it just puts you sort of like in between the two blocks here, if that makes sense, so that you're actually just standing on whatever block you're trying to get teleported to. So in the Y direction, you don't have to worry about the floating point numbers so much, because it will always teleport you using the actual grid. Now you can, if you want to, do some floating point numbers. So if you do, it will teleport you about half a block in the air if you put in that 0.5, but there's no reason to. If you want to get teleported to the block, it will just teleport you to the block. So that's how you teleport using actual coordinates, using both integers and floating point numbers. Let's talk about using relative coordinates now. So if I do /tp pg5, type in relative coordinates. Here, let's get facing the right way. So we're going to be teleporting in the positive x direction, which, as you might remember, is this direction, towards the east. So then if I teleport pg805, and I'll type in this, and say I want to move 10 blocks. Teleports me to 10.5, 56, 0.5, because that is 10 blocks away in the x direction. Teleports me right to where I was standing. So basically, using relative coordinates, it just tries to add whatever this number is to whatever your current coordinates are. So like, I was right there on 0.5 because I just teleported myself to 0.560. So let's try getting a little bit of the ways off. I'm at like 0.395 and 0.36. Let's do the same thing. And look at that, it just adds 10 to where I was. In fact, this tells me very precisely where I was, and it says where I'm teleporting to. So if I go -10, it ought to put me right back to where I was. So you can see these numbers are essentially the same. This one has, they keep the same amount of like digits here. This one rounds less than this one does when showing it to you. This one is the same though, so but these are like essentially the same numbers. All is this one plus 10 is this one, and then if you subtract 10 from this one, you get here. So you can think about relative coordinates as just adding or subtracting however much you're trying to from your current position. So the other relative coordinate system we talked about was the caret notation, based on where your cursor is. So this is to the left and right of your cursor, this is the up-down of your cursor, and this is to forward and backwards based on where you're looking. So this works essentially the same way, although it's a little bit harder to see. But I've set up a little demonstration here to hopefully show off the same way. So from here this is 0, 0, and then up here, it's 12 blocks away in the x direction, you can see here, and then in the y direction I went up 5, from 56 to 61, which if you've taken a geometry class, you may know that 12 plus, side length of 12, and then a side length of 5, and a right triangle. That's a Pythagorean triple. So this, when you have a right triangle, you should know that the third part of that Pythagorean triple is 13. So if I teleport, I'm going to be a little bit exact with this. So I slash TP PG to 5 0 56 0, and then we'll talk about what these numbers mean in just a second. But I'll put 0 and negative 23. So I'm looking about 23 degrees into the air, which would be about the angle that this triangle would have at this point. So if I slash TP PG805 and I use a caret, and the direction I'm facing, 13, I should end up right on top of that iron block. And look at that, I got teleported to 0.5, 61, 12.466, which it's about as close. It's pretty close. I didn't do the exact angle. That'd be about 22.6, so I lost a little bit of precision there, but essentially you see when it teleported me 13 blocks forward, I did actually go just 13 blocks, which put me exactly where I was expecting to be. So now it's time to talk about the third argument. You saw me just use it when I was trying to get exactly the position I'm facing, because that's what the third argument is. It's how do you want the player or entity to be facing when they're done being moved in the world. So this argument is actually optional. You've seen me do it many times without it. So like PG805 and do 10, 56, 10. I'm just facing the exact same way I was when I was over here and I used the command. But let's say I wanted to be facing north when I teleported instead. Well, I can just put in the Y rotation and then X rotation. That would put me facing north at the horizon. So we remember north is going to be negative 180, or 180 if you prefer in the Y direction, or whatever other form of whatever other form you want to type in, because it does wrap around. And then you can do 0, and that should have you looking straight forward at the horizon. And look at that, I'm looking straight at the horizon, I'm facing north. So, you know, if I wanted to face east, I would do, east was negative 90. Yep, that's east. So yeah, east right here. I can do, if I type in 0 here, has me facing south, and then also next one is 90, and this has me facing west. And so again, I can also have myself looking straight up or straight down. This is straight down, and this is straight up, using the X rotation. So yeah, you can set your rotation using these X and Y rotation. Now this last argument also comes in a few other forms as well. So you can use it just knowing exactly where they want to face, but if you may not know that, you can also just have them be facing a certain block. So how you do that is you do facing, and then you type in another set of coordinates. So let's say I want to be looking straight up, but I don't know about X and Y rotation. I would do 90, 10. And look at that, I'm looking straight up because 10, 90, 10 is directly above me. So if I teleport myself facing, let's do like 12, oops, it's 112, and we'll do like negative 12. I'm going to be looking at, it's 90, so it is going to be higher, and it's at negative 12, 12. So then let's say if I, 56 ought to be on level with me. That's going to be where negative 12, 12 is, which makes sense because this is towards the negative z, and positive x direction, because this is negative z, this is positive x. So then if you add 2 and then subtract 12 from your z, then it's going to be somewhere over around there. So that's where it's teleporting me, or that's where it's facing me this time. Now you can also have it facing entity. So, you see that pig over there. Let's face it. Type equals pig. Now, similarly to the direction, to the location or that we were trying to teleport to earlier, this can also only be one thing because you can't teleport looking at multiple things directly. So you also have to do limit equals 1 for this as well. And look at that. I'm looking right at that pig right over there. So show you. Yep, teleports me right around to where that pig is. Now, the final part of this last argument, it can also have another optional argument, anchor, the facing anchor, which can be eyes, if you want to look at something's eyes, or feet. Now let's get out a something that actually has eyes or feet, or, well, something a little bit closer to us, but this will show us a little bit better here. Is if I do a witch here, type in witch, and look at that. Now, this is a little oddity I've noticed. The eyes don't always look at the eyes, they sort of look a block above, and similarly, when you look at the feet, they also look about a block above. So when you actually type in feet, it actually anchors you to their eyes. I haven't exactly figured out why that is yet, but just know that that's a little bit odd if you want to face it, have it facing an entity, and then you want them to spawn it like looking right at their eyes. So, a little bit strange. I haven't quite figured out why that is, but yeah, strange oddity there to keep in mind. So now we've talked about the teleport command and used it to manipulate how you can move entities about within a Minecraft world. You should have a better understanding of how position in the game works, as well as how to use the teleportation command to manipulate an entity's position. Now I want you to go out and just, try a few of these. Think about what would happen if you teleport yourself. Let's look at my current coordinates here. So if you look at my current coordinates, what would happen if I teleported myself 100 blocks in the positive Z direction, that sort of thing. Just think about like what the numbers would look like in that respect. Especially like sometimes when you're using actual coordinates here, it can start to look a little bit strange because you'll be like, why am I like 1 block off from where I am? So just try to get used to it and think about what exactly you're doing to these numbers when you are using this command. Now, I want to say thanks for all the feedback that I have been receiving on these videos. I put a lot of work into them, and so it does mean a lot to me that you guys also seem to enjoy them and also care enough to leave me some feedback. So I want to thank you for that. And so yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.